all the phones bought from this year on are expected to support a certain capability, and that's going to have Apple Intelligence in mind.
What are some of the top AI features users can see on their new iPhones?
One of the key differences that Apple may or may not have yet, and we'll see what they announce, is that
what role do you think privacy will play in a Gen AI framework for both Apple and
the end game is going to be a personal assistant on your phone, and Google has moved that direction. So if we look at Apple, it's probably going to be something that moves the needle along those lines.
Hello and welcome to The Interface, the Hindus podcast to make sense of the accelerating pace of change underpinned by technology. I'm your host, Xavier, the Hindus technology editor. Expectations are high as Apple gears up to unveil the iPhone 16 on Monday, September 9th. The device will likely come with significant AI capabilities, potentially leveraging on-device processing for enhanced privacy and performance. The integration of generative AI features similar to those seen in Google's Pixel devices could be a major selling point. Additionally, improvements in camera technology, particularly computational photography, low-light performance, and zoom capabilities are also anticipated. Joining me to discuss what's in store at the GlowTime event is Phil Solis, Research Director, Connectivity and Smartphone Semiconductors at IDC. Phil, welcome to The Interface.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here.
Great. So, Phil, let's kick it off with the star of the GlowTime event, the iPhone 16. What are some of the key expectations around the device?
Yeah, so I think that you'll see some incremental improvements in the phone, and Apple has been already including an increasingly powerful NPU in many of its devices for the last, I believe, it's about 7 years already. So it's prepared to support different levels of AI services on different historical phones, and this will kind of continue that. And I think one of the things that is expected that's different this time is that all of the models will have the same new chip. And we'll see if that's true or not when they announce it. But if that's true, it makes a lot of sense because they're trying to prepare the installed base of phones for their AI services to come, right? So along with the announcement of the phone itself it's expected that they'll talk more about Apple Intelligence, right? And it won't launch immediately, the service, but it will come soon in the coming like month or two is what the expectation is. And that's what everyone is going to be focused on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea on the chipset. So the expectation is that Apple will have the same A17 Pro SoCs across all of its iPhones.
I think this year it'll be the A18 Pro, right? They changed the name from Bionic to Pro now, but with the 17, and it'll be the A18, and the expectation is that they'll put it in all the phones, and then maybe next year go back to an approach of using older chips in other phones.
Right. So what do we know about this new chipset from the Apple's new devices?
I mean, I don't think there's a lot out there, but if we just look historically at what they're doing, I think it's expected to be a 6-core chip with two very powerful cores running at a higher clock rate, the other 4 cores running at a lower clock rate, and probably an increase in the GPU capabilities, but more importantly, there should be the same or better NPU that was in the A17 Pro.
Right, and I think that that also gives a little more space for them to experiment with the large language models on the devices, like what they announced during the WWDC in June about the integration with ChatGPT for the generative AI features, right?
That's correct, right? And I guess one way to look at it is like the new capabilities that were in last year's phones, with the A17 Pro chip, that kind of upped the game, but only in the highest end phones, right? So this year they're going to put a very capable chip in all the phones, right? And then next year they can go back to using this year's chip in the lower end phones and then a new chip in the higher end phones. But basically, starting from this is like a reset year, and starting from this year, all the phones bought from this year on are expected to support a certain capability, and that's going to have Apple Intelligence in mind, right? And then you mentioned, right, they working with OpenAI in the meantime, but they have plans for their own AI service as well.
So that also means that the cost of the device could go up this year. Is that right, Phil?
That's likely to be true. Yes.
So you pointed out these Gen AI features are not going to be rolled out immediately, and it won't be available on all the phones right now. And that gives a sense that the rollout also wouldn't start immediately across geographies. It's going to be specific to US initially. But before this rollout, what are some of the top AI features users can see on their new iPhones?
I don't know if I know exactly like what they'll be announcing, right? But we could kind of look to what the rest of the market is doing to get a hint, I guess. And in the meantime, too, they can lean on even Google for some of the applications, OpenAI integrated into what Apple is doing more. And then I guess so. Let's look at what Google has announced recently, right? So historically, though, Google has supported on-device AI with things like, and actually Apple has as well, and everyone has Qualcomm, MediaTek. They've supported computational photography, and then from there, I guess, or computational photography, and also understanding voice as an input, right? And then from there, it expanded to things like you saw Google coming out with on-device transcription and translation, right? And then you saw Qualcomm showing off that they could support generative AI, right? So being able to take word input and generate pictures and videos right on the device itself, right? And see that, and that's an example of something that can showcase the potential of the processor and the software, but maybe it's not like very useful for everybody outside of maybe some marketing people that want to do a quick picture to put with a blog or something like that. But now, more recently, Google has been announcing like much more useful AI features, and they're, you know, basically they tap into its own applications, right? Like into Gmail, maybe in Photos and Google Docs and things like that, where you can just use your voice to recall, to ask for, can you show me the emails I had with this person about this topic? And it works even better than the search works, and you can do it with your voice. And then they also demoed, I guess the biggest demo they showed was like the multimodal input and output, right, between the user and Gemini Advanced with Gemini Live. And Gemini Live is where you can speak to it in real time. You don't have to keep calling upon it. You can just talk to it like a conversation. And you could use your phone's camera, take a picture of a poster, like maybe have a concert with dates on it, and you could say things like, to put that event in your calendar, right? Or, and I guess eventually things like put it in my calendar, check with these people to see when they're free. Maybe it'll check with their AI agent on their phone automatically, and then just let them okay it if they agree, and then have it buy tickets for you. So that's the direction we're going, and I think that the end game is going to be a personal assistant on your phone, and Google has moved that direction. So if we look at what Apple has said to it, it's probably going to be something that moves the needle along those lines.
Yeah, and this takes me back to one of Mustafa Suleiman's interview in which he says the future of AI will be in personal intelligence and seems to be happening in the world of smartphones. You pointed out that the Gen AI functions are also being infused into Pixel devices. So how does competition look in this context, where Google's Pixel 9 series already shows a lot of promise with the kinds of capabilities that is built into those devices? How will iPhone 16 compare to the Pixel 9 series?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? And then the Pixel series basically is getting these features first, but eventually all Android phones will get these features, right? Somebody using any Android device would be able to subscribe at some point to Gemini Advanced, right, with Gemini Live. And so, it's kind of, I've heard it said in the industry, and it sounds about right, that Apple is about 2.5 to 3 years behind Google in terms of their AI services, right? But it's not so it's not that drastic because we're at a stage right now where a lot of the AI being done on the device, right, aside from what Google just announced, right, has been just kind of like extra, or you could do it in the cloud anyway, and maybe it doesn't matter. But the more people are look to these newer features like that Google just announced, and the more that they use them, then battery life becomes important and all that. But I think that we'll see Apple try to catch up in some of what they announced, but they also are leaning on OpenAI right now, right? And you can use certain Google applications on their phone, including Gemini. You can run Gemini on an iPhone, right? But it's not going to be integrated as well as what the Pixel 9 and Gemini Advanced just announced, right? One of the key differences that Apple may or may not have yet, and we'll see what they announce, is that Gemini just doesn't run as a separate chat application. It's tied into other Google applications, right? And then I think that what you'll see is that in the future, different applications will vendors will have APIs, right? And that there will be APIs to tie things like Gemini Advanced into other third-party applications as well, like maybe let's say LinkedIn, right? For example, instead of only being able to tie into Google applications, right? So I think that's an advantage that Google has over Apple. And so when I listen to what Apple announces, I'll be looking for what Apple Intelligence is, what can it do, and can it tie into many of its own applications so that you can do more with it.
And I think that also brings up the whole idea of privacy, right? Because I think when we speak about these generic features to work well and in a coherent fashion, they need to be accessible, or they have to pick up access from multiple data points from a user's smartphone. What role do you think privacy will play in a Gen AI framework for both Apple and Google?
Privacy is important to everybody, but Apple definitely does a better job at marketing themselves as being more serious about privacy, right? But yeah, you said it. That's like one of the key reasons for on-device AI, on-device generative AI, is for privacy, right? To keep so especially when you're linking into your phone's data and application data, just so people don't have to be worried that their most private data isn't going up into the cloud and then accidentally being used for training, or and then someone else can see it in a certain way, or just being able to be hacked or something like that, right? So keeping some of that device data secure and private means keeping it on device, right? And that's what they're doing. But Apple has also you're going to have a hybrid world, right, where some of it's done on device, some of it's done in the cloud. And Apple has already announced previously that AI services that run on the cloud are run on a private partition on the cloud, and then data is not needed anymore, data is like erased or something like that. So Apple has already talked heavily about privacy, whether on device or private in the cloud. I think they called it the private cloud, right? And yeah, privacy is a key thing that Apple is looking at. But other companies are doing that as well. Google is making sure that when you do cloud-based AI, that it's private and secure, right? And they're pushing a lot of it on device primarily for that privacy reason. Then you can do more. You can tap into more of your device data without having to worry about it going into the cloud and.
Right. And I want to touch upon the form factor. As we're seeing Samsung, Google, Motorola, all of these handset makers experimenting with foldable and flip designs, but Apple seems to be stuck on the same brick form factor. And it looks like there won't be any big change this year as well. But in general, how important is the shift in the form factor for smartphones?
Yeah, I think it's great that you're seeing foldables come to market right now, and they're I mean they're excellent because you still have like a third screen on the back, right, beside the two when you open it up, the two that become one screen, I guess. So you can use those phones as like a regular phone and then open it up and get a big screen when you need it. They're great, but they're also really expensive, right? You know, well, you have the ones that kind of fold down like a clamshell, and those are smaller when they're folded, more pocketable, but they open up to more like a regular phone. But the really useful ones are the ones that open sideways, right, like a book, and you get this really big screen, but they're so expensive, right? They're in the range of the new ones of 1500, 1600 up to $1,800, like US dollars, right? At 1,800 US dollars starting price. The Pixel Fold is the same. It's 1,800 for the lowest configuration. And so, most people can't afford it or don't want to spend that much money at this point. So, for Apple, when they do something, they want to get it right. But also, I think the technology and the panels and everything like that, it has to hit lower cost points so that people can afford it, or else it's only going to be a very tiny fraction of people buying them anyway. So Apple's not in a rush to come out with a foldable phone.
And building on the form factor idea, I'd like to shift the attention to another interesting company in the market, Huawei, that's planning to come up with a triple foldable phone. And interestingly, they're also planning an event just the day after Apple's. What's your expectation from that handset maker?
Yeah, I don't know what that phone may be exactly, but overall, Huawei had run into a lot of trouble with the sanctions on chips, right? And they were restricted to 4G chips from Qualcomm only, and then they couldn't even get those, right? But they're working on their own chips. They're blocked from you, but high silicon, the chip maker, is blocked from using fabs like TSMC, and so they had to turn to their own, China's SMIC or SMIC fab, uh, to make chips, but they're behind in process node, so they're bigger, they're higher power consumption, um, but SMIC really pushed the limit to what they can do with older fab equipment. Like, for example, fab equipment that was designed for 14 nanometer, um, being pushed to the limit to like with double patterning to create 7 nanometer like chips. And now even they're talking about 5 nanometer like chips, right? Not made with 5 nanometer equipment, but made with the older equipment. So they're really pushing the limit. The yield is really bad on those chips, though. The yield being that a small percentage of those chips are usable. The rest have to be thrown out of those dies on the wafer, right? So that means that that's being done at great expense, right? But there's probably government subsidies to help them, and Huawei is pushing forward with that strategy and putting their phones out there. And Apple is facing increasing amount of competition from Huawei, right? Apple in China, Apple is losing market share to Huawei, and Huawei just keeps pushing the limit forward more and more. And there's also a sense of national pride in China, where there's a certain amount of people that want to buy the Chinese brand, right, instead of the American brand.
That's quite interesting. And when you mentioned about the state support that Huawei receives, I think it's a lot more easier for them to kind of fill the market with more and more of less expensive variants of foldable phones. That would be a game changer in the foldable landscape. What's your perspective around that?
Yeah, I mean that's a possibility. It's a possibility, but there's a lot of Chinese companies making foldables right now, right? But Huawei is the big brand that I think a lot of Chinese consumers really loved, and it's coming back, right? And so they're gaining share, and the competitors are losing share, including Apple. But yeah, they may hit the market with a more affordable foldable phone, right? And that could make a difference.
And the last segment I want to touch upon today is Siri. What can we expect from Apple's voice assistant this year, Phil?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too that in general, like Amazon, and this not typically for on device, although you can use it on device, but Amazon also, their Alexa is dated, right? So they turned to OpenAI to support a better version that should be coming out soon. And I think Apple's sort of doing the same route, right? I think for now their solution is you use Siri, and then if you need to do more, then you can use OpenAI solution, right? And it warns the user, okay, you're using OpenAI now on the cloud, and that's the approach that they've taken up until now. But perhaps OpenAI capabilities will be more integrated with Siri to push Siri forward.
Interesting. So I think it's going to be an interesting integration on several fronts, and I'll be looking forward to the event on September 9th. Thank you so much for taking time and sharing your valuable insights with us, Phil. Deeply appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Glad to join you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning into the Interface podcast. For more such episodes on technology and innovation, tune in to the Interface on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Do share your comments with us at theinterface@thehindu.co.in. To keep yourselves updated with the latest tech, please go to thehindu.com or follow us on all social media platforms. Thank you.